inequities that are faced by our communities. And so our mission is to eliminate those cancer burdens on our population through education and improved access to prevention, early detection, treatment, and survivor support. And so our vision is a world where cancer is no longer a leading cause of death for American Indians and Alaska Natives. And so we do that through culturally appropriate, community-based programs and policy change that affords Native people access to the best prevention and treatment strategies. And so we see a day where American Indian communities are free from the burdens of cancer. So we know that the disparities are unacceptable and that the work ahead is about reclaiming a strong and healthy future for generations to come. And so we believe that Native communities have the wisdoms and the solutions to cancer inequities, but are often seeking that organizational capacity or expert input and resources to do that work. And so before we getting into the framework, we'd like to share more information about what our team does at ACAF. And so we are the prevention and policy team. And so we partner with American Indian and Alaska Native communities to implement policy systems and environmental change strategies, so PSE strategies as others may know it, to promote healthy norms, health equity, and cancer prevention. So our team primarily focuses our efforts on tobacco, both preventing commercial tobacco use as well as promoting traditional tobacco and shimshasha and things like that. We also do a lot of physical activity or active living work, as well as nutrition and healthy eating efforts. So this slide just shows a quick overview of some of the work that we do and some of the different tools or resources that we offer. And so we'll go more into detail about these different things in the next slides. And so some of the overall things that we do is supporting our positive community change. And so we do that through things like community engagement, focused conversations, action planning, event planning, or coalition building. We also offer on-site and in-person training, as well as web-based distance support. We also have a variety of tools and resources that are available for communities, so things like PSE infographics, other infographics on prevention topics like HPV or breastfeeding as cancer prevention, as well as a variety of different cancer topics. We also have a lot of templates and policy examples that are available, and we also do provide public health data and making the case for change, as well as strategic plan development and different report generations. And then on the bottom, you can see the pictures of our team. So we have Melanie, me, Adonis, and Colin. And so we partner with tribes to facilitate discussions to educate and identify different policy system or environmental or PSE change strategies within their communities. And so we help tribes to identify a strategy that they would like to pursue to improve their community's health. So we worked with those communities to facilitate or to have facilitated conversations where we're able to listen and then pull themes out that emerge in draft strategies that address those community priorities. We also offer tailored presentations and trainings such as this one on how to implement PSE change strategies in different tribal communities. And so we also offer, like I said, strategic planning facilitation where we do different things like community visioning, that health and wellness prioritizing, action planning, as well as calendar creation. And so this picture here shows just like, it was done by use of different ideas of what does a healthy community look like for them. And so they just went up and drew different things. And so we were able to incorporate that into one of the reports that we completed for them. Here is also another slide that shows kind of our process for doing things and kind of how interactive they could be. So like I said, this slide shows photos of our PSE change strategy process that I described in the past, or the previous slide. And so where we gather community input and then use that information to understand the community's current reality, get everyone in the room on the same page, and then begin to identify feasible PSE strategies that the community can work on together with our support. So our action planning process or strategic planning process is we usually offer a PSE training so that everyone understands the importance of PSE change and kind of why it's how and why it can be really effective in changing community norms. We do talking circles to identify that current reality, getting everyone on that same page, as well as gauging the readiness for change within that particular community. We then go in and work with them to develop and identify their long-term goal. And then we will look at the conversations that are happening within those talking circles and really analyze those to come up with different PSE strategies that might work for them, help them, pull out which PSE strategies that they like the most and that they want to work on within their community. And then we'll do like voting activities where we can really prioritize which things to work on first. We do different consensus or brainstorming activities to identify the objectives. We also have activities to identify commitment, actual action planning where we decide who's going to do what and when. And yeah, so that is really just a quick overview of the process that we take when we do action and strategic planning with communities. This is an example of a community visioning activity that we facilitated for the Lower Sioux Indian community. And so we asked this group to imagine that it was 2019. So we did this 2 or 3 years ago. So we said, imagine that it's 2019. What does the community look and feel like after implementing the Healthy Foods Initiative? And so all members of the committee contributed their different ideas and visions, and we recorded this on a large sheet and then took it back to our office and summarized it and organized the information so it looked a lot more organized and pretty. We then put together this graphic and included it within their overall strategic plan, which they had developed and presented to their tribal council members. So yeah, it's just some of the things that we can go from like crazy ideas to something that's very organized and looks really nice. So we just like to show different examples of that. We also offer tribal policy development and implementation assistance. And so this can look like a variety of different things like policy drafting workshops or different templates that we have. Just as for examples, we also work in partnership with tribes to develop policies that they're interested in and identifying which pieces that they want to have in those. And then we also review existing ones and provide input and feedback. We also can connect to legal aid for policy, ordinance, and resolution drafting. So we work really closely with the Public Health Law Center in Minneapolis to review policy drafts and help get that legal background and make sure that everything is legally sound. And we also help present those tribal policy drafts to tribal councils. I know that some people might not feel the most comfortable in presenting those to their leadership, and so we're able to come in and help with that. We also offer ongoing and available support in coalition building. And so this can look like a lot of different things, like starting from the ground up and identifying what is the best way to build one of those from the beginning. We also offer resources and different like facilitated activities to keep existing coalitions engaged. We also offer trainings on like effective coalitions and like communication strategies and things like that. We also do a lot of community engagement strategy development. That's a really big thing with our team is we always want the community to be really engaged and making sure that all of the work that we do is really community involved and community driven. And so a lot of time this looks like event planning for creating and getting that community buy-in. So this just shows a flyer of a event that we did with the Prairie Island Indian community in Minnesota. And so they brought in Bobby Wilson to come in and talk about food sovereignty and overall like health and wellness lifestyles. And so he's a comedian, so he did a lot of jokes and funny things. And they also had a dinner by the sous chef. And they also like collected input on members that they wanted to join a new health and wellness committee that they actively do now. So it's exciting to see like from the beginning to to see a community actually working on things. So that's just one example of that. We also offer presentations, education, and resources on cancer prevention. So it could be things like what our team does is like PSC infographics and healthy eating, active living, and tobacco prevention resources and education. But we also offer cancer-specific ones through other teams at ACAF. We also do making the case for change, and so that can look like providing fact-based data and information on health, wellness, and prevention efforts, as well as developing surveys or reviewing surveys for people who are looking at getting community input to help drive some of their issue or their efforts. And we also offer grant reviewing to assist with the sustainability of initiatives. So we have some tribes that just have us look over different grant applications that they are doing. And we just try to help make them stronger. And so that is just some of the work that our team does. What happened here? Oh, there it goes. So next we'll move into more of the resource and kind of what that looks like. And so before we delve into that, we'd like to share some background information on why the framework was developed, the process, and kind of who helped us get to where we are with this resource. And so, as many of you know, prior to colonization, our communities were healthy and thriving. Colonization and cultural genocide of indigenous peoples in the United States devastated traditional food systems that naturally fostered physical activity, a healthy diet, and spiritual connection with the land. So this resulted in changes to the way Native people eat, live, and work and play today. Traditional cultural practices related to growing, harvesting, cooking, things like preserving food were lost and replaced with highly processed, unhealthy food, which has now become the only option in many regions. And so this has greatly contributed to the high rates of the chronic illness that we see today. So as a result, like I said, as a result of colonization and historical trauma, American Indians face tremendous inequities in cancer and other chronic diseases. American Indians suffer some of the highest rates of chronic disease and have the lowest life expectancy in the United States. Cancer death rates for American Indians and Alaskan Natives have increased over a 20-year span, while decreasing for whites over that same time frame. We're often on the worst end of every health indicator reported, for example, access to healthcare, environmental quality, substance abuse, and many others. So this framework was created for revitalizing indigenous traditional cultural practices, stories, and food traditions as strategies for cancer prevention and health promotion. So tribal communities and organizations are increasingly collaborating with state and federal agencies to recognize and support culturally centered interventions to address health inequities in Indian country. And so one example of this is the National Tribal Behavioral Health Agenda, which was released in December of 2016, and this introduced the Cultural Wisdom Declaration, which I'm sure some of you have seen this before. But a quote taken from that is, it was done to ensure that cultural wisdom and traditional practices are taken into account and supported as fundamental elements of programs, policies, and activities that are designed or contribute to improvements in behavioral health. And so we at the American Indian Cancer Foundation implemented this year-long project to engage community partners in creating a framework based on this Cultural Wisdom Declaration for connecting culture, food, and cancer prevention in Native communities. The Cultural Wisdom Declaration was an important starting point for this framework because it states that we will preserve and implement our cultural wisdom as a means to promote health and well-being in our communities through stories, songs, prayers, rituals, and ceremonies and other cultural or traditional practices. It also states that we'll integrate authentic cultural interventions alongside existing healthcare promotion efforts to ensure a culturally tailored and culturally relevant approach to health promotion and healthcare delivery for American Indian and Alaska Native people, which is important in the work that we do. And so at the beginning of this project, ACAF compiled a review of existing data and resources to incorporate the current food work that is currently happening across Indian country, and to ensure that we weren't recreating the wheel or doing something that someone was already doing. And so this included a literature review of over 60 publications and resources. We looked at our existing internal ACAF data and reports. So things like the Working Towards Health Equity report, our Healthy Native Foods report, our Convening Elders report, and other listening session data that we had. We also looked at the current food work funding landscape for our region to discover which funding streams were being utilized in our area. And so this slide shows the contributing partners that we worked with on this framework. And so we are grateful for our partners and their contributions to the creation of this framework. We worked with 12 different organizations ranging from across sectors, including American Indian food and cultural experts, academic institutions, and other major health organizations. Like I said, contributing partners are listed on this slide here. And funding to develop this framework and for this project was provided by the University of Minnesota Healthy Foods and Healthy Lives Institute. So many Native communities, next we'll get into the actual framework here. So many Native communities are working to normalize healthy eating to reduce cancer risk, and in turn recognize the need for culturally guided comprehensive approaches that improve access to and consumption of healthy foods. And so this framework relates to and addresses themes that came from the 2016 Native Nutrition Conference. So in particular, it addresses the need for guiding paradigms and decolonizing or re-indigenizing approaches for translating research into policy and practice and guidance for creating indigenous nutrition initiatives. And so since culture is at the center of this framework and many different definitions of culture exist, the contributing partners and the overall group thought that it was really important to develop a shared definition of culture. And so it was really important for them to all have the same idea of what culture meant to them and where they wanted to start, because culture was the center of all of this work. And so what they came up with was the definition is the learned and shared values, beliefs, norms, language, and lifetime practices of a particular group that guides thinking, decisions, and actions in patterned ways and is transmitted to succeeding generations. And so next, Colin is going to share some more information about the actual framework. So yeah, you can take it over, Colin.
All right, thanks for the great intro, Chris. So now we're going to dive into the components of the framework and just walk through what it really entails and what's really in this new resource. So there are 4 central underlying foundations rooted in Indigenous culture upon which the framework is built. So the 4 foundations are planting seeds and knowledge, eating Indigenous, cultural practices, and resources. So we found when all 4 are present and in balance, people are able to achieve their best health possible. These 4 were identified because they represent what is needed to reclaim our connection between food and health. Within each of these foundations are layers, which include the stages of life, the changing seasons, the aspects of health, and the Mitakuye, Oyasin, or all are related. So we're going to discuss all of those in detail in the coming slides. So at the end of each section of the framework, you'll find discussion questions that are presented to encourage thoughtful conversation while engaging with the framework. It is important that there is an open and honest discussion on how normalizing healthy eating can improve individual and community life. We have also included a notes page in the framework to help capture the major themes and thoughts that arise from the various discussions and assessment questions throughout. So really want you to utilize this and use it as an interactive way to engage with the community. So the discussion questions for this section, which is just like the beginning, before you delve deeper into the framework in layers, these are ones that are asking, have you identified people in your community with skills and resources to help? What financial resources can we draw upon? Are tribal leaders and community members of all ages invested in your ideas? If not, what needs to happen to get their support? And then what cultural resources can you draw upon? The next layer is the stages of life, and this is the first layer within the framework. But it's important to note that you can begin at any layer. This is just the way it's laid out in the resource. So in Indigenous cultures, we know that every person has a role and a purpose, which gives meaning to life and contributes to a sense of belonging and well-being. Roles and responsibilities around food and culture are shared through intergenerational teachings, storytellings, experiential learning, and mentoring. Stories and practices of Native wisdom uplift the 7-generation mindset to guide thinking about the futures while connecting to the past. So this layer outlines the roles that elders, adults, youth, and babies play in 4 foundations with food at the center. You can see that in the graphic that was designed. So we've included strategies in the resource for babies, youth, adults, and elders that connect our Indigenous cultural ways to health promotion and chronic disease prevention. So just as an example on the next slide, we'll look at elders. So this is kind of how it looks in the framework. So this is the elder section. So the stages of life strategies shown here, of course, are elders. As you can see, each strategy is categorized into one of the foundations that I mentioned earlier. The red circle represents cultural practices, the blue represents the resources, the green represents planting seeds and knowledge, and the orange or tan color represents eating Indigenous. So we can do things like invite elders to share traditional teachings, customs, and stories with younger generations, include elders in program planning to connect them to gardening, recruit elders to teach traditional seed saving and stewardship practices, and share harvests with elders in the community and with the elders nutrition program. So as I mentioned, in each section, there's discussion questions. So some of them for this one are, how can the food you eat contribute to health at each stage of life? Or how does our relationship to the components of the root system change as we grow older? How does food availability and quality impact health throughout the ages? And what are teachings we have about our roles related to food in each stage of life? So the next layer, or the second layer of the framework, is the changing seasons. Okay. The second layer of the framework is made up of the changing seasons, which vary by location. But for the purpose of this framework, spring, summer, fall, and winter were identified. So each season brings new opportunities. This layer guides users through recommended activities for connecting the seasons with the 4 foundations of the root system to improve health. So we selected summer. So this slide demonstrates the changing seasons layer strategies for summer season. Strategies listed here include identify what is needed and make an action plan to reclaim tribal food sovereignty with respect to ancestors, engage tribal leadership to support community health and food initiatives, and contribute to expanding local food economy. Also harvest and enjoy seasonal garden produce, wild berries, fruits, and roots. So again, there's discussion questions. I'll just read a couple of them. They are, what are your community's seasonal traditions around food and storytelling? And how is food prepared in the community? How are these practices shared among people and through time? So just some thought-provoking questions to guide conversation there. The next layer is the aspects of health. In this layer, the 4 parts of the medicine wheel are representative of the aspects of health. physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. This layer guides our users in connecting all aspects of health with cultural practices, resources, planting seeds, and planting knowledge, and of course, eating indigenous foods to improve health. So highlighted here is the emotional strategies for the aspects of health layer. Strategies include fostering a healthy emotional connection to food, honor your traditional well-being by building a support network, nurture connections with the land, and foster a sense of belonging by learning how to garden, or connect with elders by cooking fun and healthy meals together. Some of the discussion questions for the aspects of health layer look like, what does a healthy community look like to you? What food resources exist in your community? How can they be used to create more positive change and normalize healthy eating? What more do you need to make your vision of a healthy community a reality? And how can you ensure that your vision of a healthy community is designed to be sustainable? And the last is Mitakuye Oyasin. And this Lakota teaching means that we are all connected. People, plants, and animals are all related, and we take care of each other. This teaching helps us understand that we can achieve health when we are in balance. If one aspect of health, mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual, is off, others become out of balance. Like the teaching, this framework is designed to connect the stages of life, changing seasons, and aspects of health in a holistic way to achieve good health through food. So the framework reminds us that our culture reflects our values, qualities, and abilities. So there's some assessment questions at the end. If you've gone through the resource that read, did this framework help people identify and share insights about your traditions of culture? What connections between culture, food, and health were shared? Were all people who assembled around this framework able to share their thoughts? And what changes do you expect to occur in response to engagement with this framework? So we just kind of want to, the next slide, talk about how you can really apply this framework in your tribal community. So we came up with a list or some potential ways to do that. So the framework supports Native communities in their efforts to rely on culturally informed health promotion activities related to food while demonstrating the value of and need for culturally centered approaches to improving health outcomes. You can use the framework in several ways that make sense to your community. For example, one way is to host community conversations to review the framework with stakeholders, which may include community members, local food and health advocates, tribal leaders. Use the discussion questions that we kind of highlighted at the end of each section to guide discussion. This will allow you to gain insight on how you can leverage your tribal community's cultural food ways to advance the health and wellness of your community members. I think you're muted, Chris. Now you can go.
Okay, so you can also use this tool as a tool to frame healthy eating in a way that heals intergenerational trauma and understand how instilling those healthy eating behaviors in young people can increase their resilience to adverse childhood experiences or ACEs.
You can also use the framework as a guide to justify implementing culture as prevention strategies to major funding agencies who traditionally do not fund this kind of work. So this hopefully can help educate funders on the importance of culture as prevention to promote health in our communities.
Incorporate this framework into health education curriculum to instill the importance of using our cultural ways to be healthy.
Another way we thought is using it as a tool to help any new staff onboarding to familiarize themselves to community food work or to generate new ideas from new staff.
And the last thing that we came up with was to utilize the strategy to integrate aspects of culture into your community's chronic disease prevention activities. So keep in mind that you may already be implementing some of the strategies in your community. So it's our hope that this framework and the strategies spark new ideas and generate new thinking, which will serve as a catalyst in raising the awareness of decolonizing or re-indigenizing approaches for translating research into policy, practice, and guidance for creating indigenous nutrition initiatives And so we'll also share an article with Jennifer at Great Plains that shows different real life examples of how others are utilizing and implementing this framework into their work. So we just had an article published, I think last week or the week before, that kind of shows more different examples of how people are actually utilizing this framework. So we'll just make sure to send that over to Jen.
So this quote is a quote from one of our partners that contributed during one of the planning meetings, and it says, "If we take care of today, tomorrow will take care of itself." So we just wanted to end talking about the framework on that note. The next, I just wanted to quickly highlight another new resource that we just came out with, and this is our Ordering Nutritious and Indigenous Foods. It's a guidelines and checklist. So this was developed by ACAF, but also had help from some of our partners at Public Health Law Center and a dietitian, Stacey Hammer, from Lower Sioux Indian community. So the goal of this resource is to start to normalize healthy and indigenous eating and foods among American Indian and Alaska Native communities across the nation. So healthy eating plays an important role in chronic disease prevention, as we've been talking about. And we hope this tool is just one solution in progressing towards having our communities free from the burdens of cancer. So it's designed for anyone to use, and it's designed for anyone who may be ordering or serving food for a meeting, event, or any gathering of some sort. So just a quick look inside. We can provide copies of this as well if you're interested. But when you open up the resource, this is just kind of what it looks like. In the first section, it's the serving guidelines and checklist. It covers everything from serving size, portion size, and food preparation, just helping make that healthy and hopefully an indigenous choice if possible. So as you can see, the guideline is on the left and the checklist is on the right. For example, if you're looking for guidance on desserts, look for the corresponding section. So the guideline reads, ensure dessert dimensions are not larger than 2 inches by 2 inches, choose fresh fruit for half or more of the dessert, or choose desserts that are 100 calories or less. And then you can just simply check off the box when you've completed the step. That's just a little look into one of our other resources we wanted to highlight for you all. And next, we're just going to do a Kahoot. So I don't know if anyone's done it, but what you'll do is Chris will share the screen with you. So if you're following along on the computer, you can play along. It's just a quick interactive quiz, and you need to go to kahoot.it on your cell phone. So you can see there, it's Kahoot, KAHOOT.IT. So kahoot.it. And then once you get to the website, it'll ask you for a game pin. And you can put in the game pin, which is on the screen there. It is 397540. So you're going to kahoot.it, KAHOOT.IT, and the game pin is 397540. And we should see people pop up in there in a moment. So it looks like we have Charlotte joined us. Yep, people, very good. We'll give it a couple of minutes. Again, kahoot.it, and the game pin is 397540. I don't know how many people are on that call.
I think it's also important to note that those of you who are only on the phone, this might not work for you because the questions are on the shared screen. And so just a little note on that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. If you're on the phone, it probably will not work. But we have a good number of people. We'll wait a couple more seconds here for players to join. Whenever you're ready, Chris, I think a good number.
Okay, good to go.
Yeah, so we're going to hit start. And so what happens is we'll get the question and you'll respond on your phone. So true or false, historical trauma impacted traditional foodways. So red triangle if true, blue diamond if false. Just respond on your phone. Very good. True. So yes, historical trauma impacted traditional foodways. And it goes by correct answer and time to respond. I think we're ready to move on. All of the following are part of the framework except cultural practices, social media, eating indigenous, or planting seeds of knowledge. So all the following are part of the framework except, very good. Social media is not a part of it, but could be a strategy that is identified throughout discussion. Which age group should be considered when working on food initiatives to promote health? Youth, adults and elders, or all of the above? Very good. All of the above. In the framework, aspects of health include all of the following except emotional, physical, holistic, or spiritual. Very good. Holistic, we just look at it as a holistic approach, but that was not one of them. True or false? There are discussion questions at the end of each section to guide community discussion. Very good. That was a quick one. We went over those a lot. ACAF can provide technical assistance in which area? Facilitated community conversations, strategic planning facilitation, policy systems and environmental one-on-one training, or all of the above? Yep, all of the above. So we just wanted to do a quick interactive quiz with you guys. Looks like Charlotte is the winner. Very good. I think everyone got them all right. Good job. Thanks, guys, for playing.
So with that, that is the end of our webinar. Both the Reclaiming Indigenous Food Relationships Framework Resource and the other checklist and guidelines for ordering nutrition and indigenous foods are available on our website at acaf.org, so AICAF.org. Feel free to make and distribute copies of the materials as long as credit is provided to ACAF. We're also able to provide hard copies. If you guys are interested in that, just let us know. Also reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to share how you're using the framework or the other resource in your community. We're always interested in to see like how all of our resources are actually being applied within the communities. So feel free to reach out to either of us.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you, Chris and Colin, for presenting on that awesome resource. Does anyone have any questions for Chris or Colin? I saw a few people typed in the chat box, but I think we got those answered about getting resources out or finding them on your website. Does anyone else have any other questions? I am going to post an evaluation link in the chat box. We do have a question. Gina asked, has ACAF partnered with FDPIR on nutrition education grants?
So we have not. We are looking, now we are, in Minnesota specifically, we are doing a lot of work with SNAP-Ed and those kind of nutrition grants, but we haven't done it with the FDPIR.
Carlos asked if he can get a copy of the PowerPoint. When we send out the recording of today's webinar, everyone that is on the email today or on the webinar today we'll be getting a follow-up email. If you have never been on this webinar before, please put your email in the chat box to make sure we can send you a follow-up email, and it will have the recorded session along with the slides, if Chris and Colin are okay with sharing their PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, we'll send them out.
Yeah, so we can get that out to everyone that's on today. So just make sure that you have your email address in the chat box, and we'll make sure to get out the recorded session and the slides. So I did put our evaluation link in the chat box. If you could just take a quick second to fill that out. We always appreciate everyone's feedback. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone that our next webinar is going to be on March 13th. We're going to have Chad Radigan with the Great Plains Colorectal Cancer Screening Initiative doing a webinar on colorectal cancer 101. So we will be sending out an invite for that. And looks like Chris and Colin put their email addresses into the chat. If you would like to reach out to them with any questions, you can definitely do that too. We can stay on for a little bit longer if anyone else has any questions. Otherwise, thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.